William Gibson once said, "The future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed." The time has come to draw attention to science fiction stories written all over the planet. Stories made of different languages, colors, shapes, hopes and beliefs. The future happens everywhere. That's why we are here.
Hi, everybody. This is our.
Hola, Rodrigo. Hola, hola a todos. Hello, everyone.
This is our third panel of today, of the second day of FutureCon 2021. And this year in FutureCon 2021, we want to engage with even more native innovators and storytellers that make science fiction happen and flourish in their own language and markets. We want to build the tools that we will reshape our own imagination, set up creative networks, make room for the independent voices, crafting publishing alternatives and self-sustainable connections to decolonize the future. Remember that FutureCon is free. It will not generate no profit or revenue whatsoever. However, contributions are more than welcome. You can visit all the panels that we're all these 3 days, all the bios of the panelists in our webpage www.futureconsf.com. We want to thanks to ALCIF, the Chilean Association of Fantasy and Science Fiction, that is helping with all the things of the tech and the things with the internet that it's make that this thing is happen. You can also follow us in our YouTube channel. We have a Discord channel and we have a Twitter account. So all the places that you can follow FutureCon is gonna be great for us to share all these things that happen in science fiction. So for this third panel, we again continue making the future happens everywhere, and that's why we are here. Thanks to all of you in YouTube, and thanks to our panelists is far away in your screens, but very close to our hearts. Thank you to be here. So this panel is a beautiful panel for me. It's a panel of archaeologies of the future, ruins, smart cities, and indigenous solution in building a space to live in. So in here we have very. I want to present yourselves. I know it's very weird sometimes talk about oneself in third person, but I want to present yourself. So we start with Gushi. Is the first person.
Hi everyone, I'm Gushi and I'm in Beijing now. So it's midnight here and really happy to join FutureCon. So I am a science fiction writer and also I am a urban planner. So I've been working as a researcher at China's Academy of Urban Planning and Design for 10 years, I think. Yeah. So I've been participated in a lot of urban planning programs, and also now I'm working for the government to do a renewal of a park. So really nice to meet you.
Thank you, and I'm sure that your words about the urbanization in this panel will be so rich for all the conversation. So with us also we have Hugo Espinoza. So Hugo.
Hola, hello, everyone. Yeah, well, I'm an architect that I study here in Peru. I'm from Peru. I'm based on Lima. I'm an architect, and I'm also a comic book artist, which happens to like especially comic books of sci-fi, science fiction. So I'm gonna give a little my take on that. I'm currently working as an architect, of course, and also developing a study for a park, archaeological zoo park here in Lima, to help develop the place and revitalize the archaeology aspect of it.
Thank you, Hugo. Also, we have a lot of architects who think the city from the fiction, so it's gonna be great. So here we also have Lavanya. Hi, Lavanya. How are you?
Hi, Rodrigo. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Lavanya Lakshminaryan. I'm from Bangalore, India. I'm a science fiction writer and I'm the author of Analog Virtual and other simulations of your future. Um, I love imagining future cities and writing about how we can make them sustainable through my fiction. And I'm really excited and looking forward to all the conversation we're going to have here.
Thank you, Lavanya. It's great to hear you. And last but not least, so we have in here Divya. I know I've say good your name, Divya. It's okay. Okay, thank you, Divya. So
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here and to be back with FutureCon. I'm very excited. I'm also a science fiction author and written a couple of books, Runtime, and my first novel, Machinehood. I'm also the co-editor at Escape Pod, a weekly science fiction podcast. And by day and by trade, I'm an electrical engineer with a background in computational neuroscience and signal processing. So not super directly involved in architecture and urban planning like Gushi and Hugo, but very interested in the future of urbanization, but also other possible futures, especially those that incorporate nature and natural elements back into our lives, and solar punk. So thank you.
no, thank you. And I don't know. Maybe I thought that all the writers of science fiction also are in some kind architecture because the thing that happens in their books have to imagine the cities, the places, and the planets, and all the things. So in some way, there are architecture in all the in science fiction writers. So I want to start with something. The solar punk is here. Say it's, I want to start with some quote that I found. That's I don't know. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that starting the 20th century, Chet, correct me if my pronunciation, please. Chet Glove, that's a very important architecture of the beginning of the 20th century, wrote, "Architecture is the simplest means of articulating time and space, of modulating reality, of engendering dreams." And I want to start with this because architecture and urbanism is not only create cities, is like the quote I say, articulating time, articulating space, articulating realities and dreams. So the first thing I want to know to open this this table is all the time I thought in some idea that happens in the 50s, in the 15th, in the 20th century, that I love, that call it psychogeography. In psychogeography, very a lot of philosophers and thinkers say that the city modifies the people who lives in the cities. So from that point, I like to know what has your personal modification of your state of mind, of your soul, of your way to see the life through the cities you have lived. Not only who lived right now, of your lived, have you seen the modification of your souls, your point of views, your, I don't know, maybe your personality or changing by the cities you have lived in your life? So I'm gonna say names for the beginning, but you can participate whatever you want. So I know. Gu can start, please.
Okay, so really happy to have this panel. So of course, I believe that city could change people's behavior. Usually in urban planning, when we are trying to do urban planning, and we are trying to make sure everything is organized. Like in the 20 20th century, and maybe in the 30s, 20s, and then 1930 or 1940s. And so when the Le Corbusier and other architects, they gather together and they try to settle a new rule for the city urban planning, and to just like to organize the city with four basic functions. First is to where people to live, and the second is where to people to work, and the third is where people can have their leisure time, like the parks, and where to like go to the museums. And the fourth is the transportation and how people get from one place to the other. So before that, we can see the cities are not really like planned as we believe it's to be. And I've been traveling to a lot of places, and so I really enjoy like going to Europe and to see the very small towns there. And when I go there, and I started to notice that people, when the city and the towns are built, and the people live in a very different way, because when you go there and then you see a small church, and which is the highest building, and also maybe the biggest as well. But like where I live in Beijing, and it's really hard to find like where is the biggest. Maybe the squares are bigger, or like the roads. And now you can see the convention center; they're very big. And then you started to know that these places, they have the biggest land of the city, and which means that people's behavior have been changed a lot. So also, I just checked. It should be Louis Montfort, and who is a huge urban planner. He said, like, if I see your city, and then I know how the people live there, and so you could feel the city whenever you go to one place, and then you can see that how different these places are. So like the cities in China, they are also very different. Like in Beijing, the roads are wider, which means more people they are using cars. But like when I spent 3 months in Paris, and the roads in Paris are not that wide. It's much easier for me to like walking from just like on foot, like from one place to another place. And so I really enjoyed in Paris. But I said to myself, I will come back to Beijing and I will work to the place I'm working. But the truth is, it's not that easy for me to do so. And then I started to use a car, like maybe 1 week I get back from Paris. So that you can see that when the city is built, and it already like designed some of the basic rules of how people are going to use it. So this is very interesting, because it has, so as an urban planner and also a citizen, like I'm from the both perspectives. So I'm trying to understand, like when I'm trying to draw a line on my design, and what will change like of the city. And sometimes it's not that easy, because even something is right, because like that there should be a bigger garden, bigger park for people, but the land is very expensive, and they also want to build a residential house. And also, even if you know that we need more residential house, but if there are too many people, like the density of people are too crowded, and then people will not really live there very happy. So then you have to lower the density. So you have always, like, you're trying to balance everything. So it's very interesting, very hard, but sometimes you have to, like, just talking to everybody who are in the city and who want to build the city, and then try to find a solution why. Yeah.
Thank you. I love Lewis Mumford, so I have to say. You say Lewis Mumford, and I say, oh, I love Lewis Mumford. It's very good. So it's very interesting because it has so many dynamics in the city, but it's not always the same dynamic. So there's some kind of tension between something uh, that share all the cities and some things that happen in every city in particular. So I like to love. I don't know. I'm gonna say names because it's very hard to. But Divya, do you like to say what happened? What modifies you, and what happened in your writing also with the different cities you lived in?
Yeah. So I spent the first 5 years of my life in Delhi and at the time Madras, which is now Chennai. And then I came to the US and I've lived in various cities here in the middle part of the US where there's snow and winter, and now in Southern California, in Los Angeles and its suburbs. And it's interesting, the different cultures. And like Gushi says, some places are built for walking and some places are built for cars. Some places are built for snow and rain and tornadoes. The place I live now doesn't have much of any of those things. We are built for earthquakes and heat. So I think that's how I've I guess how I've personally been shaped is by discovering what I connect with in these cities. I also enjoy walking outdoors, but I cannot do that in a practical way, even to go shopping for food. I have to get in a car because we're talking, 3-4 kilometers just to go buy my groceries, and considerably more to get to an office or to drop my daughter off at school. So it's almost impractical to live here without some kind of vehicle, whether it's a bus or a car, or nowadays e-bikes have become very popular around here since the pandemic. So, battery powered electric bicycles. But the other thing that I discovered is I need those green spaces. I need a place where I can walk and not see the city in order for my soul to be satisfied. So out in the suburbs where we ended up buying a house, across the street, there are wilderness trails where people ride horses, you can hike, you can bike, and it's a little narrow strip of land surrounded by housing, but within that space I can kind of try to at least somewhat forget that I am in a city life. And that's something that I find personally very important, and I think for a lot of people is missing, and was missing for me when I was deep in the heart of Los Angeles, in a 100% urbanized concrete jungle, as they used to call it, right? Where everything is built, everything is, asphalt and cement and steel. And you might have a few trees and bushes here and there, but you never really have that sort of wide open space feel of being away from a city. And I feel like just naturally being animals, we kind of need that balance in our lives. And that's one thing that I always look for when I travel, as well as, where I live and places I've lived in the past.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna have two questions, but I'm gonna make it short after after the other, because it's very interesting. This connect between the cities and the nature, and we're gonna talk about this later. But I like to hear maybe Hugo, what's your idea of your cities and how's uh, your you as an Hugo for the cities that you live in?
Hey, hello everyone. Um, Again, yeah. Well, yeah, behavior is very important for architects, right? We've been trying to understand the behavior of humankind for quite some time, and when we plan a city, that's really important, right? But sometimes the architect is also an impressionable being that's ruled by his society's own ethical content, and he's always trying to prove and reproduce it. Take for instance, when these are I don't remember the name, the architects that designed the gardens of Versailles, the palace in Versailles in the outskirts of Paris. They were planning this park as very orga- um, um, order place, right? This is the perfect place to be. But you see, Paris was so chaotic and was all different made. It was made of much more organic way. And well, in terms of the behavior, I for once I like to walk. I like to walk a lot. I don't like to drive. Okay, so I like places when I can take long walks and be like, and Lima, the city I'm living in, it's like that. I can walk whatever I want. When I went to Brasilia, for instance, Brasilia was a city that was planned by the Brazilian architect Oscar Niemeyer, and it's a city really harsh for pedestrians. Really, it's a city that if you don't have a car, you're screwed pretty much. It's right. And it was hard for me when I went to. I didn't like. I mean, it's beautiful and everything, and it's really organized and was really planned, and it works perfectly, right? But it's really not that friendly for a pedestrian. So I think those kind of things are the things that we need to have in mind when we create and we design a city. Maybe a city that's entirely planned to the very least to the minimum point. It's might be not that friendly for the people who live in there. And other thing we need to be aware of is the public space, right? When, well, for instance, I'm going to talk about the Incas because that's pretty much what I have at hand. The Incas, they have the indoor spaces of the Incas were reduced to just the place where they work, really small places when they do pottery or pottery specifically. The place where they slept, sorry, and maybe a little kitchen that was protected by from the harsh environment and everything, but everything else was like outskirts, outside. It was the plaza, it was the patio, that was the most important place in their society, and that works for them. And that talks about how their relationship between them shaped their community, right? I've seen that similar in this how it's called this tower in Hong Kong. It's Hong Kong is, I don't remember where it is. Anyway, there's a capsule tower in Nagita. I don't remember the name. Anyway, yeah, I think behavior it's what we need to focus, and we need to study the behavior of a specific city before we design for it, right? We cannot place a building in here in Lima and then reproduce the building in Mexico or in or in Beijing, because situations are different and behavior is different, and the needs of people and the people who live there are completely different.
Okay, thank you. There's two things that I'm gonna say about this thing that Hugo said that is very important about the, for example, the Incas and all the thing about we are here also in this panel. We want to talk about how this innovation of, for example, the indigenous people can that we can rethinking about how we thinking about the cities, and that's very important. But I don't want to pass. I have a lot of things in subject in here. So, but Lavanya, how does it works to live in the cities you lived in for you and for your work as a writer?
I think what really draws me to writing about cities and kind of comes through in my work is how cities are constantly evolving. There is a very dynamic relationship between the people who live in a city and thereby inform its design and the city itself. You know what you inherit, what you get to work with. A simple example, I've lived in multiple cities in India, but I've spent most of my time in Bangalore. And Bangalore was a smaller city until it had this massive IT boom a couple of decades ago. And, you know, it was an old British cantonment when we were colonized. And all these narrow little roads suddenly had to support this massive influx of a population. Rapid unplanned development took place all across the city. And what that wound up doing, I think, was impacting a lot of the behaviors that we had in the city. You know, growing up here, we had to, you know, be very self-sufficient, rely on driving around or, you know, other forms of transport. We never really had fantastic public transport, but now the infrastructure that we did have absolutely cannot support the population that we deal with. Um, a lot of the central areas expanded rapidly, and you know, I live in a tiny residential area in the heart of the city, but less than 500 meters away, there's a bunch of bars, there's a bunch of coffee shops, and there are a whole bunch of offices, right? So all of this is crammed in, and 500 meters in the other direction is an enormous park. Now, this makes the city really vibrant, but it's also a pretty confusing experience. Um, and again, you know, we're talking about a city that was not intended, I think, at least in its initial design, to incorporate this. Now, what kind of impact has it had on living here? You know, where I think over the years, especially when I used to work as a game designer, I think the city got more and more insular. There were, you know, I spent a lot of my time working at my desk, having everything door delivered to me because it was just so painful to step out and pick up things for myself because traffic density here is unbelievable. Um, and, you know, like Gushi, Gushi says that, you know, she drives around. I can't stand driving in the city. I refuse to drive in the city. It's awful. I would much rather take an Uber, sit in the back seat, and you know, like check my phone and catch up on reading than drive here. At the same time, it's not particularly pedestrian friendly, you know. So it's the good things that have come out of it. You know, it's become a lot more cosmopolitan. I would argue that when there are more people about, and when you know you've got way more nightlife, it does tend to feel a lot safer stepping out because you always know there are going to be people. But downside is none of it is developed to sustain this. Um, and that is something that really troubles me. It's why I tend to dwell on cities in my writing. It's why I'm also drawn to solar punk like Divya, just because it's so claustrophobic to think that this rapid development is going to continue on unchecked if we don't intervene and attempt to come up with solutions for the long term.
Thank you, Lavanya. So it's very strange that at least all the people talk about the traffic. maybe the traffic is in one another way, the traffic is a subject very important in all the cities. All of you talk about the traffic, and here also the traffic is chaotic. So okay, I wanna talk about something, and I'm gonna take a question that made in YouTube, the Arun G, and say, I know many places. So it's possible to keep the natural habitat, whether trees, forests, and design spaces for various purposes instead of encroaching forest. And I want to talk about this because there's something that I thought when Divya was talking, because they say there's some places built for hurricanes, built for earthquakes, built for snow, built for people, or like Hugo said, for pedestrians, for cars, etc., etc. So when we talk in our fiction about how the cities of the indigenous people, for example, or the native cities, was a very close relation with nature. It looks more like these cities that made for earthquakes or snow or something has a relation with nature, but not with nature. It's like I think this. I don't know if you think that too, but not with nature, but over nature. Like we have to live, and I don't know. We live in this place, and we have snow. Okay, we have to adapt this city for snow, but my idea, I don't know if you could share this idea, we can talk it, is that when we talk about the cities of the native cities, it's more like built with the nature, no? Some kind of dialogue, very useful for the people and for the nature. In your fictions and in your readings of science fiction and what you think about in science fiction for the future, what happened with these thugs? And no, I'm gonna say this and no more. In some part, Francesco Versa was in here talk about how the cigarette of Blade Runner in the first scene of Blade Runner is something that it happens already, but it looks like future. So it's possible to rethink these cities of the native imagination, to rebuild, rethinking our cities in our work fiction for the future. I know it's a very big thing, but it's an idea. I don't know. Someone want to start or no? Or I say names. Divya, Divya,
I could
okay,
go.
Divya. Thank you, Divya.
um, I definitely consider, these factors of environment and weather, nature, and how we want to integrate with our environment in the future. I think it's a big question right now in reality, and that's why, at least I'm seeing it explored a lot in science fiction literature for sure, in short stories as well as in books. But you know, how in the future are we going to choose to interact with nature? Because in the previous century, most science fiction envisioned, like you said, that we're just going to exclude it, right? We go from the cities of today and the skyscrapers to domes and just habitats for humanity that are completely isolated and insulated from what happens in the planet and the ecosphere around it, so that we are 100% in control of our environment. And the question for me is, is that really the right way to go? And I think other people are starting to question that too, and looking at indigenous cultures specifically in terms of how they were able to integrate with animals, with plants, with the ecosystem, to embody those things and to kind of learn to live within those parameters rather than against or exclusive of them. And the question is, can we do that? And I think it's a difficult question because we have a lot more people. It's one thing to have something like the Incans or the Harappans, these ancient civilizations where a big city was 100,000 people, right? versus today, where a big city is 10, 15, 20, 30 million people. So can we necessarily scale and integrate with nature the way they did? And I think the answer is probably no, but the question in my mind, science fictionally, is can we envision a future where we do find a way to integrate, maybe different set of solutions, where we have, more carbon sinks in the form of forests and open bodies of water, which we know we need, but also where we can have more wildlife and where we can respect their needs, as well as the needs of human beings. So those are my off the top of my head thoughts.
Thank you, Divya. It's a very solar punk idea, so I celebrate that because something I need to. I like to think that we have to think in utopias also. So it's very nice. So thank you. So anyone else? I don't know. I don't want to say names because it sounds like you. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a very interesting question because this is what we urban planners always talking about when we are trying to do new cities and new districts, and we're always trying to say that we are going to build a new city which is so friendly with the environment. But I'm still questioning because, well, you're trying to build a new city, and how can you be friendly with the environment? Anyway, we can have a lot of ways to deal with this problem. For example, the park I'm trying to do the renewal. So it's a very long railway, like in the center of Beijing. And when we are trying to rebuild the railway park, and we try to light or corridor or a road for the animals, like for the rabbits, like they can just run into the city center and also run out of it. And because there are so many roads, and they are going to be, by the cars, killed by the cars. So this is really bad. But also, I'm thinking about the question you have asked, is there a new way of building a city? Because that depends on the reason. Because, like, if we just want to protect the forest, and then it's not a real reason, like in the real life. Because when we are trying to build a city, that means a lot of people need places to live in. But I'm writing a new story, so maybe it's going to be my first novel, and the story based on question. So if we want to move to another planet, like we have to, there will be 1 million people on a spaceship, like for 1,000 years, and people must go there. But I have this question, like, how could people, like in this 1,000 years, don't have war on the spaceship? So, and then I have to design a new city, a new way to try to, try to build a new city, and then try to make sure that people's behavior is what I expected. So, and then there will be maybe wars and to stop the war before it happened. But I try to read a lot of history, and I never really find like any country could have a peaceful like 1,000 or maybe 100 year history, and it's impossible. So that's very interesting. So we have to find the real question, like we can then start to imagine a real answer and try to find another answer for that. So I believe that's one of the things that all of the science fiction writer really enjoys doing. So yeah.
Yeah. I never thought about that into ship and the wars and the construction of the city. And it's a very interesting point of view. Thank you, Hugo. Hugo, Lavanya, yeah, whatever you too.
All right.
Okay,
Go.
Hugo, thank you.
Yeah, well, out of the question, if we can just look back and see how the ancient civilizations deal with nature, we need to start by thinking why they did that, right? And I think maybe the answer is because they revered nature in a way we do not. They worship nature in a way they were their gods, right? Not actually gods, but uh, they 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 realized that nature was their main sustain. Nature sustained their lives, right? So they nurtured it, and they create buildings, and everything in their society was to be accommodate around the nature and be respectful of it. We do not have that. Can we have that? I mean, a moment ago we were talking about how I was saying a building cannot be placed in one place and then repeated in some other place, and that works for time too. We cannot just take a solution that happened years ago and just apply it to this moment. We have to come up with our own solution, as Gushi was implying, right? We have to find a way to add that respect for nature and realize that without it we are nothing. We're nothing right now. With nothing, right? So I think in architectural design, this discussion has been there for some years now, right? There's this magazine called Ivolo, which has a contest every year of skyscraper building, and all the solutions you can watch it, you can see it in the internet, are really cool, really sci-fi skyscrapers and most different kind of buildings that incorporate the nature in their design. That's what we need to do. We have to incorporate nature in the design, but we have to be, as we were talking about behavior, what do we need as a society? Everyone needs the same thing. We need the nature. Yes, we need the nature. That's something we can all agree on. But we actually also need the relation between us, and having a lot of people together is part of it. So when we Divya, I believe, was talking about how she likes to live in the outskirts, and we're surrounded by nature, and that's something I would like to do too. Like I'm that kind of person, but not everyone is like us. My wife, she keeps telling me, I like the city because it's full of energy and it's full of things that happen all the time. I need that, and I think most people will need that too. That doesn't mean we don't need to add some trees in the mix, right? We need to. There is this park in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the Eco Park, Buenos Aires Eco Park, I think it's called, which transformed their, not ancient, but the old zoo. They had a zoo in Buenos Aires, and they are transforming it into a friendly park in the city, which everyone can interact with, and interact with animals that are free. Of course, they're not lions, but there are animals that are part of the Argentinian culture and part of the land that we live in. So it's more important by that perspective to understand where you live in, what animals and what nature was there for instance, for starts, rather than think about lions and tigers and other stuff. No.
Okay, thank you. I'm off for seconds because my internet, my problems of my urbanistic problems with the internet was that. But Lavanya, what do you think about this relationship between the urban and the nature, and all this relationship that happens in fiction and your work
Um,
also?
I'm excited about whether we can, go back to nature, but incorporate it for a modern world using, modern technologies. Um, when I was writing my novel, and as I continue to write, I keep looking at sustainable architecture solutions, building materials, mycelium blocks that will actually let you use them as a substrate to grow plants from them. Of course, it's possibly unrealistic to expect that every single building in a city will be replaced by this. But what can we do with the spaces that we do have? With, let's say, introducing vertical farm spaces, or tiny little gardens. I mean, maybe a garden the size of a 10 by 10 room like the one I'm sitting in right now. And is that something we could do as a community? Could we bring neighborhoods together to actually invest in bringing nature back to our streets, making them a part of our ecosystem just as much as the next apartment building or the next mall is? That's something that really excites me. Of course, it will take convincing, because, as Hugo said, in the past, nature was revered. It was worshipped by all ancient civilizations. Looking at the Harappans in northern India and Pakistan, they had so much reverence for water, and even though they used really complex irrigation systems and reservoirs and all of that, it was, at least from what we know reading about them and from archaeological studies, it seems like it was such a symbiotic relationship. We are supporting people who number in the millions, though. So how can we get those millions to come together and spend, I don't know, an hour a week, 3 hours a week, bringing little pockets of nature back to our streets? I would love to see that personally.
Thank you, Lavanya. I'm gonna talk about one book, that one classic science fiction, The City of Clifford Simak. This is my Spanish version, so it's very beautiful, really. But why I want to talk about City of Clifford Simak? Because Clifford Simak, in some way, talk about how city, in some way, has in the heart of the city is the end of the city, because there's overpopulation in the city, and that overpopulation makes that people don't want to live more in cities and choose to live outside the cities, in some rural places, in the field, I don't know, in some other places. That takes me to a question about how science fiction, this question that made Clifford Simak in here, makes me think about how in science fiction uh, there's uh, a lot of science fiction happens in the cities. So the first idea we have in science fiction is one big screen with big colors, neon all over the city, all the things that you can manage with your cell phone, and I don't know, the all these things that happen with one thing about science fiction. But there is no a lot of science fiction that happens in the rural. I'm not saying that not happens, but I think that the idea of science fiction is related to the city. So, in your work or in your readings, I want to ask you two things. First, what do you think about this? Is possible that it can change all uh, the ideas of the science fiction from the urban to the field, to the places that it's now really cities? Because how can we imagine a science fiction outside the cities, right? Because it's very hard to think, because we have technology all the time with the science fiction and the cell phones and the screens and all the things. And that's the first question. And the second question that is related to the first one is, what books or movies or cultural objects, I don't know, operas or music, do you recommend to rethink that science fiction imaginary and take to the other places? Yeah, I know maybe it's a huge question, but but what do you think is possible rethinking science fiction and take the science fiction to the rural space or not? Lavanya says it has the face that he wants to respond this one first.
Uh, I think it's definitely possible. I think, science fiction can reflect the human experience in communities, and they don't always have to exist in what we think of as incredibly futuristic cities. With, like you said, the screens and the self-driving cars and all of that. I think someone who does this wonderfully well is N.K. Jameson in the Broken Earth trilogy, where she has these communities. I mean, they're called comms, and if she starts off there, there are cities across that trilogy, including smart cities. But she focuses on relationships between human beings in a community. She focuses on the relationships between human beings when circumstances force them to leave the community. Who do they meet on the road? How do they reform communal living spaces? And the entire premise of the book is pretty post-apocalyptic. So there are massive climate events and plagues and all of that routinely sort of affects the earth. And in spite of this, so I think she takes a very decentralized perspective on this, and really focuses on the community without necessarily putting the community in a large scale city.
Thank you, thank you, Lavanya. Yes. And maybe if you see something titles or authors, I appreciate if you write in the chat.
Yeah.
We can just thank you, Lavanya. I don't know. Go. I say go. No. So Divya raise her hand down.
Oh, it's okay. If you want to have Gushi go first, that's fine. No, I was thinking that the trouble is, right, like the places I've seen where science fiction goes to sort of away from the cities is either post-apocalyptic or space travel and settling brand new planets where there are no cities. And in both of those cases, the commonality is that there's not as many people. Like looking at, the trend of human history over 10,000 years, the cities have gotten bigger, urban areas have become more dense, and a lot of it is just out of the, that increase of the number of human beings on this planet. And so without, like in Lavanya's example, without these cataclysmic events that are just wiping out the population periodically, how do you get away from the need for that urban, highly dense kind of space? And so, yeah, I don't know. And then the sort of the really interesting, I guess, super alternate futures I've seen are The Stars Are Legion by Cameron Hurley, and also I think Binti by Nadia Okorafor and Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. These are all cases where people are traveling in space, but they're in living creatures as their spacecraft rather than, a big metal box. And that sort of conception is like way out there kind of science fiction, right? Versus if you look at anything that's set in the next 100 or even 200 years, unless it's post-apocalyptic, unless there's been a huge disaster wiping out masses of people in the cities and breaking them down, I don't really see a lot of alternatives, because I think we have trouble coming up with practical ways that we can move people out of cities. Cities are just kind of necessary for mass amounts of human beings. So I'm curious if Gushi, especially, or Hugo, have any ideas from their field of work of examples where you could house billions of people on this planet, not in cities.
So, thank you, Divya. Divya, sorry. I'm thinking the first story I think about is also happening in Mars. The Martian. So, so that's like the life on Mars. Like only one people can be counted as urban, or uh, you know, rural life, because he grows potatoes by himself. But I think that's not really where what the question is really focused about. So the problem is really serious, because when we are trying to imagine the future, and we always forgot the people like in the rural area. And also I try to like list the stories I could remember, and only maybe one or two is about them, and they are written by Liu Cixin. And so one of the story is called The Teacher in the Rural. And so it's about the alien. They are coming to the Earth and to try to make sure that human beings have intelligence, and they just randomly pick some children and to test them. And this teacher in the rural, and he is trying his best to teach very poor young child to know the technology, to learn from the real, to know about the world. And then luckily the children pass the test, but the teacher is died of cancer, maybe, I think. So it's very very side story, and I cannot really saying that it's about the future of the rural places. So also another story written by him is called the Fire of the Earth. So it's about a coal mine. So we have a mine where we have a lot of corn, so the coal mine. So it's where can set a lot like a oil mine. Yeah, where I have a lot of oils, for example, and there is a fire like to go to the mine, and then there's a huge fire that never really stops. So it's not really about the future of the human. It's about how to stop a fire that cannot be stopped. So it's really hard for me to imagine anything of like a few what the rural places will be like in 100 years, or maybe 2,000 years. And also for me, and I've only been like living in the huge cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Paris, which have like more than 10 million people. So maybe Hugo have better answer for this question.
Oh well, I was going to be on with Divya on this matter, because I do think cities are the big part of or the big part of our culture, right? And listen, all these matters we were discussing before, like nature in the cities, and how the communities, how the things work in there, and the behavior and everything, it's based on cities. So how are we supposed to leave that behind if we want to tell something? That's the matter we want to discuss, right? So I think cities are an important part of the discussion we need to have. That being said, um, I also think that the most you need to have a post-apocalyptic issue or a space travel to really deep into what happens when the population is really small. I do think about this movie Interstellar, right, in which the first part of the movie is based on an outskirt of a city, right, and they're dealing with a problem with hunger, I believe. So I do think we need to focus on cities still, but there's other um, communities and populated centers that might help us too. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for my trouble with the internet. I'm going and came back. So um, I want to say a last question. I know that it's a lot of questions in the chat also. You can hear me, okay? Yeah, yeah, okay. So we're gonna play something because we are talking about the archaeologies of the future. So we are travel into time in time, and we are like Gushi in some moments say we are 200, 300, 500 years from now. So in here I remember the poem Ozymandias by Shelley that talking about the ruins like not like something that left, that it's something itself, the ruins. So when you travel 200, 500, 400 years in the future, and you visit and make an archaeology of what happens now, we are the native innovation right now. So what do you think that we can find in these cities when we are not the present but the past, and you are archaeologists that are searching for what the ruins of our cities are gonna talk about us? I don't know if I explained the game. What do you think of the ruins of our cities of today are going to talk about us? I don't know if
Okay,
anyone.
I'll go first.
Go. Okay, go.
Um,
Thank you.
if I'm an archaeologist from the future, um, I would say archaeology has evolved enough, right? Because otherwise, um, we're gonna have. I mean, right now, most of our content and it's stored in the cloud. It's virtual. So in a few years by now, I'm hoping not, there will be few books than before. So the evidence we are leaving physically, it's gonna be it's becoming less common, right? So if I'm an archaeologist in the future, I better have developed a better way to dig from the past than just dig dirt. I better have come with a way to, I don't know, dig from the cyberspace. That's even possible. I don't know. I will have to come up with some sort of archaeologist cloud or Wi-Fi. I don't know if Wi-Fi stays there all the time, but I don't know. Maybe I remember we were creating the comic book we did back in 2014. It was called Panoptica: The Final Days of the Future. We we thought about that, and we thought about having a cloud of nanites. I mean, the servers are not in one place, but the servers are actually in the cloud, so everyone can connect and gather information from it, right? So if that's not the case, how are we going to gather this information that we are not storing in physical form? That's my question. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you, Hugo. And someone else want to follow the idea, the game of the being an archaeologist, maybe.
Yeah, I'll go. I was thinking
Go,
along similar
could
lines,
be
Hugo.
next.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking along similar lines. I think only
Sorry.
um
You hear me? Yeah. No,
yeah,
no,
I can hear
that's
you. I can hear you,
so I have
Rodrigo.
this connection problem. So, good. Maybe if you want to say what you find in the archaeologist game of the future.
Lavanya just started already.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
I'll
have this
but
problem
you can
of
go ahead.
internet,
You
so
you
I
can
don't hear no Lavanas, no Divya. So sorry for that. Sorry.
no worries.
Continue. I
I
can hear you, but continue, please.
okay. I was thinking along similar lines to Hugo. I think people will find those enormous data centers, and for better or for worse, they'll be filled with all our tweets and a ton of pornography, because I think that's going to be the legacy that we leave. Um, and that's a shame, because I don't know what else is going to outlive us.
I think Gu or Divya should go just because he's not.
Yes, sorry. I don't have the audio. So I'm gonna ask if Francesco is in there can help me to manage this time because I have this internet connection trouble. So, sorry for that.
All right, on the fly. Yes, I can jump in and take over from there. Rodrigo, you did an excellent work. I'm sorry for the connections. Yeah, I'm following the game. So I was in the backstage, and so what would be the remains, or what would be the legacy of our post-industrial civilization? We are already in a post-industrial civilization. Apart from servers, which maybe are already being explored. She, you want to jump in?
Okay, thank you, Francesco. I'm thinking about the future, or sorry, how does that word say, the archaeological, sorry, archaeology. So are they really human? So maybe if they are not, and they couldn't even see our ruins, that's one possibility. So maybe they're just thinking, okay, this rock is a little bigger than the others, and then they just cross the planet, and then they go to the moon, and they find another, civilization that they believe it is. But if they could really tell that the city had once lived with human beings, I believe they could be a little bit confused because all the buildings, they are built for people shapes like us, like we are, I don't know, 1 meter and 70 centimeters, 170 centimeters high, and we are weight for about maybe 60 or 70 kilograms. But when they look at the roads and the cars, and maybe if I'm them, and then I will think maybe the car is what the human beings should be like. So they're going to be very confused. And even they go to the airport, and then they find, okay, this human being civilization can be combined with three or four kind of animals. So one is really big, huge, like airplane. And so also there's a very tiny one, like the bugs in the huge animals. So it can be seen as a lot of things. So I'm trying to say that the size of our buildings is really important for other other creature to understand our civilization. So that's my point of view.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I just throw in a couple of concepts. The first one is the pandemic. We've seen how fast nature takes back its place and times and zones. I come from Rome, and we have these huge archaeologies of the past that still insist in our town. So the Colosseum, but if without managing the Colosseum, vegetation could take over very fast, like it happened, during the pandemics, where nobody was going around, and we have started to have, small animals or the taking over of the nature very fast. So of course, this is a factor where that probably the archaeologists will have to take into consideration, just as much as we do have ruins in Rome that still stand, and probably some of the mega structure of the Chinese architecture will stand for a very long time, and that's a very important thing. One of the concept that Rodrigo explored, and I would like to throw in for maybe the last, is the concept of the native innovation. So because I will put it. I will ask this question, and I will in the chat. I will do it now. Let's say that the city of our time is a cyberpunk city. Maybe the city of our future could be a solar punk. So I would like to argue to see your point of view. Is it right? I mean, I've been in China and the city is just like cyberpunk, 100%. But maybe the future could be something more integrated. I've seen projects in China that nature is being integrated in the tissue of the urban planning, and as Lavanya said, vertical farms, roof gardens, all these elements could be part of a new kind of green architecture. But even though I don't really like this term, but would be solar punk a narrative of this future? Probably. Whoever, Divya, you can start.
I think it's possible to have a solar punk future. I don't know how practical it is from a political will point, because what we're dealing with today in terms of climate change and its effects are more people, at least the conversations I'm seeing are people trying to make cities more resilient to bigger storms, to flooding, to drought, and not necessarily going in the direction of the science fictional vision of solar punk, which I think involves, like we're saying, integrating green spaces into our living spaces. And, it's kind of interesting, like a bunch of things are coming together. Lavanya was talking earlier, I think, about, other building materials, and maybe it's not realistic that every building in the city will be, changed to these different building materials. But then I'm thinking back to the start of cities and civilizations where people were building out of mud and straw, and then later wood, but eventually concrete. And if you walk into a city today, very few new buildings are ever built out of bricks. Bricks are practical and mud bricks are cheap, and so is straw, but they don't withstand, disasters. They don't withstand storms, earthquakes, floods, as well as steel and concrete. So I think it's possible that we could see, by necessity, if climate change continues on its current trend to just keep getting worse, that maybe we have to, make adaptations both in terms of how we build our structures, in addition to reforestation and kind of the bigger picture carbon sinks that we're trying to do in order to mitigate. But in a practical, like everyday standpoint of where we live and how we live, we could certainly have new material science, right? Things that are roadways that are porous, that allow better drainage when we have rainfall, buildings that are better able to withstand, high winds or earthquakes or heat waves, right? We need better cooling systems. And so for some of that, I see some people kind of talking about greening, but not necessarily in the way of, because it's good for humanity to have a vertical wall of plants in every, in every flat, in every high rise. So it's a balance. And I think the solar punk vision of the future is maybe a little bit different from the practical reality of the next 100 years and the really immediate reality of the next 20 to 50 years of rising temperature in seas.
Well, there's people talking about that transition. So the solar punk, of course, will not happen in one day. It's a long way to decarbonize our civilization, and in a way to decapitalize our civilization, which probably has brought us to the very edge of climate collapse, as we are experiencing even in these days. I don't know, somebody else, Hugo, you you've been working on something like that, right? If I'm correct, one of your comic.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I would like to address the idea of what we are going forward, because not all the answers need to be the same. One of the big things, as Divya was saying, about how ancient civilizations built with materials like mud and the extra soil, is because it's what they had at hand, right? It's what happens. It was what they were surrounded by. So that's a thing we need to focus on, I think, and be mindful of where we are. I mean, if we are in a highly seismic area, please try not to build that many skyscrapers, right? Sense different solutions. Of course, you can, with mud, you cannot build a big building, but you can, of course, check out some of the solutions the indigenous people in the area had. Right here in Lima, there is this enclave called Huacapuquiana, which it predates the Incas actually, and their solution to the earthquakes was curious at most. Instead of putting bricks one over the other like this, they use soil, and they use a unit made of soil, water, and seashells called the tika, and they just put it like vertically like this, one inside of the other, and in layers, and they left a little space in between. So when the quake came, each piece vibrate differently than the other one. So if one failed, the other one just could have been there, and not, and the whole building will not fail in as a whole, right? I think that's a thing we need to look into it and investigate that, right? So as to what Francesco was referring, yes, we need to check out different solutions. For instance, in the Titicaca Lake, which is the highest lake in the world, there live a population called the Uros. They have developed through time a way to live not on land but on islands that they create out of totora, which is the a little straw, pretty much.
Yeah.
This is a straw.
Yeah.
And I just read actually the little short story by Francesco. I read it here in Jack Damasi, which is a book of Peruvian speculative fiction. How the idea was to repurpose that solution from the Euros in other places, which can use in the book, the protagonist used the spirogyra, which was an algae in Bakhar Lake in Russia, to create also these islands. And they repurposed the ancient idea from other part of the world into a lake that helped them create a economy out of it, because the Euros they use that to build the islands, to eat them, to create houses, everything. The economy is based on that, and tourism, of course. But I think that's the way to go. We need, if you want to check solutions that happened before, we need to look forward and just don't copy them, and that we need to study them and find why they did that, and see if we can actually learn from something from them.
Yep. Oh no, Lavanya, it's you. Who wants to? You want to add something?
Go ahead, She.
Okay. Just add a little thing. So this I believe is a very serious problem because recently the zero carbon is a very big deal, like in China, and our academy is doing a lot of plannings about zero carbon city. But I believe it's really hard because so Lavanya just noticed like the material of the building, and then we can also have the solar, to energy to make the cost less carbon. But all these materials cost money. So which means that like if you use the zero carbon like only in very rich cities like maybe Beijing, Shanghai, and when you're trying to build new cities, there are ways, but if you want to lower it to zero, now we could only find like this kind of place in Dubai, and which means that it is the richest place. So that's really possible for all the places to spend that much of money, and then to lower their like the carbon cost to zero. And also like in Beijing, like when I was a teenager, like 12 or 15 years before, and the air pollution is really, really serious. But now if you come to Beijing, it's much better, like for this 10 years. But that also costs a lot. So when we talk about the ruins, and the first place I think about is Shougang Park. So like it was a very, very huge factory in Beijing, to the west of Beijing, and maybe there are tens of thousands of people who work there. But at that time, when they want to stop the pollution, and they just move all these people to another city. So that's really hard. Like they are moving all the families to another place because they do not want the factories to pollute the air. So that's a lot of problems. So you have to understand that if you want to, just be really friendly with the nature, and the cost is really big, and does that really possible for us to our city to do that? So, like for the urban planners, we are trying to do the balance. Like we spend less money and we cost less, but we trying to like make sure that there are more. The city is getting better and better. And like when we are trying to already building a park, and also we are already like building a new building, and then we just add some money to the building at maybe 10%. If that it will like lower the carbon, and that's okay. Maybe in the next 10 years, and the money will come back because the material is good, and we don't need that much of heat or something else. So that's doing the balance. So we have to like maybe have the smart city to help us to do so. So it just mentions we never really talk about smart city in this panel. Yeah.
Yeah, the concept. Yeah, sorry, Lavanya, you want to jump in?
Just to sort of echo some of what has been said here, like Gushi said, even in India, when we do have some sources of nuclear energy that has resulted in large-scale displacement of rural populations. I think in the short term, climate change is immediate. It is a crisis already. And I think it's important to move towards, easier short-term solutions like rainwater harvesting and solar power that can be done off rooftops, sustainable gardening, I suppose, that people can do in their backyards. The question is how this can be made accessible to wider sections of the population, because it is expensive. But in a more distant future, I'd like to see access to these technologies and the development of these technologies sort of decentralized, decoupled from capitalism, and being designed from the perspective of profit, And this is, of course, wildly speculative and extremely optimistic, but I would love to see communities come together to think of grassroots solutions that are best for the neighborhoods they live in or the small spaces they occupy, and be empowered with the tools to design these solutions themselves, instead of relying on some form of central power, whether that is a government or a corporation. So that's just my 2 cents on this.
Thank you. Oh, I think if there are no other comments in this, we might just wrap up, because the time will around 1 hour and a half. So thank you a lot for your time. We've been really having a long panel. A big part of it was Rodrigo's credit, of course. I just jump in for networking problems. So thank you very much. I remind the people that we will have another panel soon. It's What Punk Are You? So we're gonna be talking about steampunk, cyberpunk, and solar punk in terms of anti-capitalistic approach to science fiction. And I really thank the panelists. It was a really wonderful and interesting conversation. And please remember that you can follow all the panels of the FutureCon on our YouTube channel. You can support the team by donating any amount of money. You can do it on our webpage. You can follow the conversation on our Discord server. We are opening new channels by the hour, according to the people desires and their request. So thank you again, and I hope you will also see other panels, and see you later. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Also,
Bye.
William Gibson once said, "The future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed." The time has come to draw attention to science fiction stories written all over the planet. Stories made of different languages, colors, shapes, hopes, and beliefs. The future happens everywhere. That's why we are here.